Meeting to order. Thank you to all of those members of the public as well as Planning Commission members who joined. I will start us off with a land acknowledgement. As we begin our meeting today, we respectfully acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respects to the Coast Salish elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous people today. It is to also recognize these lands, these waters, and their significance for the resilience and wise peoples who continue to thrive in this region, despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in the city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using the various forms of wealth and privilege they reap due to it. All right. Welcome to members of the public. We are happy to make all commission meetings open to members of the public. Please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since the commission is an advisory body. Our role is to provide recommendations to the elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to the elected officials. This meeting is in a hybrid format with some individuals participating remotely while others are participating in the boards and commissions room at Seattle City Hall. I will move us on to our color brave space norms. What we normally do is invite one of the commissioners to choose and briefly speak to one of the color brave space norms that they feel have particular relevance to today's agenda. With that, I am going to call on Nicholas, if you are with us.
Yes, I am. So I would like to bring forward the keep focused on our collective goal, create racial justice through Black liberation and Native sovereignty as a area that I'd like to have us focus on with the agenda topic.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm sorry I called you Nicholas and not Nick. Habit of reading off the Teams chat list of names. If there are no amendments or modifications to these color brave space norms, I suggest that we use them for the meeting today. On the agenda today, we have one item, which is an update of the downtown activation efforts being led by the Office of Planning and Community Development. I do not believe that we have quorum, so I propose that we postpone approving the meeting minutes from the last meeting until the end of the meeting if we have quorum at that time. So I will move on to the chair's report instead. We have two upcoming meetings. The first is the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting, which is next Thursday, January 16th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. That meeting will be online only using the MS Teams platform. And our next full Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday morning, January 23rd from 7:30 a.m., 7:30 to 9 a.m. And again, that meeting will, that meeting will be hybrid, held on the MS Teams platform. That meeting will not be hybrid, Vanessa?
It will be hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, yeah. That's okay. Will it be in the boards and commissions room?
Yes.
Yes. So as today. Sorry about that. And with that, I turn the floor over to announcements and commission business from our lead staff, Vanessa Murdoch.
Thank you, Michaela. Apologies for that mistake in the chair's notes. As noted before, this is a hybrid meeting. We actually have all commissioners on the call today participating remotely and only staff in the boards and commissions room. Just a reminder to commissioners to only use the chat function to be recognized to speak. or to share a publicly available resource that you might be referencing. I will assist Michaela in the chair in keeping tabs on who's next up in the queue. I do have a couple of just commission administration points to point out. Olivia is working on the annual report for all of your good work that was accomplished last year. And as part of that annual report, we include the number of hours that commissioners have volunteered. And we like to present that because that is a significant amount of volunteer time on your behalf to the people of Seattle and Seattle's elected officials. So with that, if you have not responded to Robin's request for those hours, please go ahead and send her those hours. You do not need to include the time you spend in these meetings and in committee meetings, as Robin tallies those from the attendance for the meetings. It's really, we are interested in the hours that you might be spending attending other meetings on behalf of the Planning Commission, reviewing materials to prepare for these meetings, and whatnot. So if you have any questions, let me know. Please do get those numbers into Robin as soon as possible. If it's easier for you to generate an average number of hours that you think spending outside of meeting time in service to the Planning Commission, you can just send Robin that average on a monthly basis. Also, just a reminder to please respond to Robin's emails that go out a week in advance of the Planning Commission meetings. If you accept the calendar invite, that doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to be there, especially if you accept the invite when she sends them out a year in advance. So please do take a moment just to hit a quick reply and say, yes, I'll be there, or no, I won't. And if you're unable to attend, please note the reason why. A work conflict, illness, travel, something like that, because Robin does a great job of keeping tabs on all of that, all of those details. So I'm going to suggest we go through a round of introductions, and then I will address, I'll comment on our public comment. We don't have any members of the public who have signed up for public comment, but I will go over the details of how that works. But first, I'm going to turn it back to Michaela to start us off with a round of introductions, and we'll wrap up with staff.
All right. What we'll do is I will introduce myself, pass it on to someone else, and it will be your responsibility to pass it along. So please provide your name, your preferred pronouns, where you live, and if you care to, what you do for a living. So my name is Michaela Daffern. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I will pass it to Matt Hutchins.
My name is Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns. I live in West Seattle, and I'm going to pass it to, let's see if I can see here. I see Nick.
Hello, Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I also live in West Seattle in the North Delridge neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a city planner on the east side. How about Andy?
Hi, Andy Dannenberg, he, him, live in Northeast Seattle, and I teach at University of Washington in public health and urban planning. I can't see who is.
How about Matt Malloy?
Okay, thank you.
Hey y'all, Matt Malloy, he, him pronouns. For a living, I work at a restaurant. I'm working on my master's in teaching, and I'll pass it to Rose.
Hey all, Rose Lucella Whitson pronouns, they, them. I'll have my camera off most of today. I'm under the weather, but figured you should at least know who I am for folks who are members of the public. I live in the Licton Springs neighborhood within the Northgate planning area though, and I work as a professional wetland scientist and permitting specialist for Jacobs Engineering. Okay, passing to Deanna.
I'm Deanna. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I'm a multimodal transportation planner. I'll pass it over to, who should I pass it over to? Help.
Let's, how about you, Robin, if you're still on the call?
Robin, okay.
Robin McGonigal. I am staff to the Planning Commission, and I live in Vashon, and I use she, her, they, them pronouns. Olivia.
Hey everyone, Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission. Vanessa?
I'll wrap us up. Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the All Volunteer Planning Commission. Staff is not volunteers, but the planning commissioners are. As Michaela noted earlier, we welcome public comment. We have 2 public comment periods during our meetings before we entertain substantive comment, and then at the end of the meeting, we ask that people either email me in advance of the meeting any public comments that you have, and I can read them aloud, or you're more than welcome to join us here in the Boards and Commissions room of City Hall to provide in-person public comment. I have not received any emails from any members of the public, so we at this point do not have any public comment, and I can turn it back over to Michaela.
All right. Thank you for that, Vanessa. That brings us then to our primary and only agenda item, which is an update on the downtown activation planning efforts. Tiernan Martin, a newish employee with the city's Office of Planning and Community Development, is joining us to provide an update on the work he's leading to help activate downtown Seattle. We have an hour for this agenda item. And Tiernan, this is your first meeting. We are always a group with questions and ideas. So please leave 30 minutes following your briefing for questions and comments. With that, I turn the floor over to you, Tiernan.
Thanks, Michaela. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. And since you all did introductions, maybe I'll add mine as well. So my name is Tiernan Martin. I use he, him pronouns. I live in the Chinatown International District neighborhood, and I am the Downtown Activation Coordinator with the Office of Planning and Community Development. And that's the topic that I'm going to give you all a briefing on today. But before we jump in, I just have to confess that I'm an avid fan of the Commission's reports and white papers. I've been consuming them ever since I was a graduate student. So I'm excited to be here. I know some of you from past work and some of you I don't know yet. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to working alongside you all going forward. And with that, I will share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so today's briefing is going to be on a sort of survey of work that I'm engaged in. I'll just preface it by saying all this is teamwork, both within the Office of Planning and Community Development, amongst our broader city family, other departments, and folks outside the city as well. So know that whenever I talk about work that I'm doing, it's always me as part of a team. Might be a bit of a lag in our slide situation. Okay, there we go. I am not going to bore you with my history and background too much. I'll just share that, you know, I joined the city in July of 2024. So I've been here for about 6 months learning about this role and department. Prior to working for the city, I worked for FutureWise, which is a land use advocacy and accountability nonprofit organization. I was there for 9 years and had a variety of roles, including most recently Director of Research. And the projects that I worked on were kind of a blend of advocacy and research. They were in Seattle and elsewhere. I also did some coalition organizing with the Complete Communities Coalition, which works on the Seattle Comprehensive Plan. Other sort of relevant stuff about me is that I live in the Chinatown International District and have been living there for the last 15 years. And it's always been a sort of commitment and habit of mine to get involved in my neighborhood. And the ways I've chosen to do that are things like serving on boards, like the International Special Review District Board, and the board of directors for a public development authority that serves that neighborhood. So it's with those perspectives that I joined the city in this role, and I'm excited to give you an update on all the things that we're working on in the Downtown Activation Plan and beyond. So there's going to be kind of three general buckets in the briefing today. These are all sort of parts of my role as Downtown Activation Coordinator. And you'll notice that the Downtown Activation Plan itself is just one of those buckets, but of course it touches all three of my roles. So my responsibilities are first to engage and liaise with the CID community. That pertains to downtown activation planning, it pertains to the downtown sub-area plan that my colleagues are working on, and to planning around sound transits, light rail stations. So with my sort of connections, relationships, folks I know in the neighborhood, I am trying to make sure that all of our offices' work is connected to the stakeholders in the CID. And that work is deeply partnering with our friends at the Department of Neighborhoods. Secondly, I coordinate OPCD's initiatives that are part of the Greater Downtown Activation Plan umbrella. And I'm going to share some of the work that we're doing with you a little later on and go into more detail there. Lastly, I manage a couple of long-term planning projects that are happening in Greater Downtown. And some of those have sort of medium-term horizons, and some of them are farther out, but all of them, once realized, will contribute to a revitalized downtown neighborhood. Okay. So with that first role, I think it's important to just acknowledge that the Chinatown International District is a unique and historic neighborhood with deep cultural roots and a history of overcoming challenges, particularly harms caused by public works projects and of course racial discrimination. But it's that first category of harms that I'm sort of thinking about most these days. Looking back in history, we see projects like the interstate highway system, the construction of the downtown transit tunnel, the Kingdome, and a little bit more recently, the First Hill streetcar. All those have had sort of disproportionate burden on the Chinatown International District community. And that community has been very vocal about how important it is for them to preserve their neighborhood, their cultures, and for the city to be a partner in that work. And so in 2023, Mayor Harrell committed to an approach that is leading while listening, and to partnering with the CID community to address historic harms. And so as the sort of OPCD liaison to the CID, my work is sort of trying to realize that commitment. As I mentioned, I work closely with the Department of Neighborhoods CID liaison, Soka Dawn. And one of the things that we work on together is providing support to the CID Visioning Advisory Group, which is a coalition of many leaders and organizations in the CID that have come together to advocate for their neighborhood. And so we, Soka and I, staff their meetings and sort of provide the connective tissue to the city. And right now I'm working with Soka to both sort of support that group, to help implement their strategic plan. And outside of that group, working to set up an internal department, interdepartmental team with other city departments to make sure that we're always coordinated when we come to the CID. If folks are interested in a deeper dive on that, I would love to come back and maybe perhaps bring Soko with me, and we can talk about the exciting work that the CID Visioning Advisory Group is up to. Okay, moving on to downtown activation planning and OPCD's role within it. I'll first kind of provide a general overview of what the downtown activation plan is, and then we can talk about our department's role. So the Downtown Activation Plan, or the DAP, as it's sometimes referred to, is a really comprehensive strategy focused on reimagining downtown Seattle. And it sort of looks at 7 goals, which are here on the screen. They sort of span a wide range of different topics. And it includes lots of different projects that achieve these goals, multiple projects per goal, not all of which OPCD is the lead on, but some of them we are. When we talk about downtown, it's important to be specific here. We're talking about a sort of broader geography than the casual, resident of Seattle or visitor might have in mind. So it includes everything from Belltown and Denny Triangle in the north, down through the commercial core and the waterfront, all the way down to the CID, the Stadium District in the south. So it's a pretty broad geography, very diverse in terms of the businesses and residents and people that come to these neighborhoods. And that means that we're working on a wide variety of projects, not all of them in every neighborhood. For folks who are interested in sort of tracking the progress of the plan in general, not just specific to OPCD, the Office of Economic Development has a downtown activation dashboard. Showing a screenshot of one page of that dashboard on the screen right now, but they track the deliverables and other sort of data points relevant to reactivating downtown and improving downtown. And so I'd encourage you to check that out. It's something that they endeavor to update quarterly. So if you're ever looking for the most recent data on this work, that's a good place to start. Okay, so now I'm shifting into some of the work that OPCD is running lead on, and I've got a sampling of sort of legislative projects, but there's other projects that are not necessarily legislative in nature. The downtown retail core zoning amendment, which was completed last year, upzoned a sort of small, like a couple of blocks in the downtown core area. And that allowed for buildings like the one you see on the screen to be developed. So that's hopefully going to result in some really exciting development in the downtown core. There was also legislative work done to increase the sort of regulatory flexibility for lodging in the Belltown neighborhood. That work is also completed. The topic that I'll focus on today in a little bit more detail is our department's work on facilitating office to residential conversion. And in fact, it could be any use converting to residential in the downtown area. So more on that in a second. 2 other projects that I'm just sort of like flagging and putting on the commission's radar, which are still under consideration. So it's sort of early days on this, and I unfortunately don't have any detailed information to share about them, but some things that we're thinking about as a department are looking at the upper level building signage regulations and seeing if there's any flexibility that could be added to it. And then doing some initial looks at what it would mean to set up a tax increment financing area to invest some of the tax revenue from development back into that geography. Also, folks can look at the briefing that my colleague Jeff Wentland did a little over a year ago now for more information about those first 2 items. Okay, so facilitating office to residential conversion is something that is sort of a flagship policy in the downtown activation plan. Our department has been out ahead on this idea, although it's broadly being pursued across the country by cities that are working to reimagine their downtown core areas in this sort of post-pandemic period. And so, some of the work that our office has done in 2023, we issued a call for ideas and a competition for designers, architects, policy folks, what have you, to come up with interesting residential conversion proposals. And it was structured as a competition, and the winner was selected, and they had a really interesting conversation with Director Kieran Dongo at the Seattle Design Festival. Check that out online if you're interested in that discussion. So that was the sort of beginning of our work. What we've done since then is taken a hard look, along with Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections, at what are the barriers, the regulatory barriers that could be relaxed or removed to help facilitate this type of, innovative project. And so many exemptions were studied, and several of them were advanced as legislation that was adopted in 2024 to do just that. So relaxing of design standards, the removal of the requirement to pay into the mandatory housing affordability fund for these projects are just two of the things that were changed. And we're hoping that that'll make it easier for this type of project, which is definitely challenging to pencil. What's coming up next is something that was allowed at the state level last legislative session, which is a policy that will allow these types of projects to defer the sales and use tax of their construction costs, which could be a significant amount. That's roughly 10% of their construction costs. In exchange for that, those projects will be required to make at least 10% of their residential units affordable to households at 80% of the area median income. And so we're hopeful that legislation will pass. We're working with the Land Use Committee to host a public hearing, which is scheduled for February 4th. So if you're interested in that, please come and weigh in. So that's one sort of upcoming legislative project that our office is working on. In terms of the actual projects that are out there, I will say I've emphasized that this is difficult. It requires an innovative approach. There are several sort of buildings that have been identified as having floor plates and circumstances that might make this more viable than others. One of them, which was part of that 2023 Call for Ideas competition, was the Joseph Vance building on 3rd Avenue in the downtown core. And our office has been working with the owners and their architects and designers to sort of help facilitate that project. We're happy to report that while there are lots of barriers, the whole city is kind of working to try to identify them and support this project through its permitting process. So they've advanced through their sort of pre-submission conference, and we're hoping to see them continue going forward. So I'm going to shift a little bit from the more near-term solutions to long-term planning projects. So some of these are explicitly written into the downtown activation plan, and some of them just are sort of in the neighborhood, so to speak, and are important for the future revitalization of this greater downtown area. The sort of ones that I'll focus on today are planning and community engagement work for the lidding of I-5 where it runs through downtown, the redevelopment of the Wasca site, which I'll explain what that is in a second, the King County Civic Campus Initiative, and sort of some of the planning work and preparation that's going on for the new CID station and the South Downtown Hub planning process. I won't get us into the last two items on the list there, Pier 48 and 3rd Avenue, because they don't have a lot to report at this moment, but maybe a future briefing, we can dive into those. So starting with Lit I-5, I hope you all are aware of this effort. It's been going on for at least 9 years now. It began as a sort of community and volunteer-led advocacy campaign, and it's been successful in that regard. And OPCD has stepped in and supported the effort. In 2020, we released a feasibility study for several concepts for lidding I-5 in the downtown core. And I'm pleased to announce that the city applied for and received federal funding to continue that work. We received $2 million from the federal government and an additional $200,000 from the state to expand that feasibility study. So it'll be a larger geography running from Yesler Way in the south all the way to Thomas Street in the north. And it will update some of the sort of feasibility study assumptions of that first one. Additionally, we will be working with community members to define a community vision for this project and sketch out some of the sort of urban design concepts for what these lids might look like and how they might serve the community. So that work is really exciting. We've had to do a fair amount of sort of grant administration to actually get the funding that we were awarded, but I'm pleased to announce that we have received word from the Federal Highway Administration that money is authorized. And so the next step for us will be to procure a team of consultants and begin work, which we hope to do in mid-2025. Quick flag, this is not a OPCD led initiative, but the Lit I-5 community advocacy group is hosting a series of panel discussions on this project. The first one will be January 15th, which is next Wednesday in the evening. If you Google Lit I-5 and then Beer and Culture, which is the name of this series that Lit I-5 is going to be presenting at three of their series, you'll find a link to the event. Second medium or long-term planning project that I'm working on in the sort of downtown area is the WASCA redevelopment. WASCA stands for the Washington and Oregon Shippers Cooperative Association. It is a 5-acre state-owned piece of land, sort of sandwiched between the stadiums and Pier 46, just south of Pioneer Square and just north of SoDo. It was previously used for construction staging during the State Route 99 viaduct removal and is currently vacant. WashDOT has partnered with the city of Seattle and with an international organization called C40. And together we are coordinating a global call for submissions for what the future of this site should hold. It's a multi-year process that will have 3 phases. There was the request for information phase that wrapped up last fall. There will be a request for qualifications starting later this year. And then finally, there will be an invite-only request for proposals from the sort of top scoring participants in the RFQ. The goal is to, by 2027, have selected a team to enter into a public-private partnership with WashDOT to redevelop this site. Now, there are many interests in the vicinity of this site, and they have lots of different ideas for what this site should be used for and maybe what it should not be used for. But generally, the city and state are aligned on several things, including our interest in seeing some sort of mixed-use campus, it contributing to downtown revitalization, making good progress on the state and city's respective climate action commitments, and advancing the maritime industry and celebrating our maritime heritage. So there's a lot of sort of details to how this works. The Office of Planning and Community Development, for our part, will be developing a conceptual master plan to help facilitate the vision of the winning team and WashDOT, and then we will be preparing legislation for consideration to the Seattle City Council if that's necessary. The next sort of medium-term project, this is both medium and long-term, is a proposal that came from the King County Executive's Office last year, which looks at the county's downtown Seattle campus and observes that there are many facilities in need of repair or replacement, and starts to think about what the future of that campus might look like. And what they propose is relocating some of the criminal justice functions, including the correctional facility and the court, elsewhere in the city, and redeveloping the county properties in the sort of area, between Pioneer Square, CID, and downtown into a 24-hour mixed-use district. It's a really visionary document that they have produced, and there's lots that the city would need to do to help facilitate that work. So OPCD has been working closely with staff from the county executive's office. Our director serves on the steering committee for this work. And we've been sort of thinking about, how can this vision integrate with the city's various planning projects, including the DAP, including the Downtown Regional Center Plan, which is being worked on now. And of course, looking ahead to Sound Transit's Ballard Link extension, which will certainly influence this project in the future as we get more certainty about where the Midtown Station will be built. This is exciting work. It's very early days, but we are working really hard to partner with the county. And just, I think it was on Tuesday, the county council, King County Council, passed a resolution describing the goals of this project. And so it does seem like both the executive and legislative branch of the county are committed to seeing this project through, ambitious though it may be. Okay, this is the last update I have for you before we pause and have some questions and back and forth. So thank you for bearing with me. One of the other major projects that OPCD is working on is sort of generally thinking about how the Ballard Link extension, Sound Transit's new light rail line, is going to impact downtown. And two of the stations that are station areas that we expect to be dramatically impacted are Pioneer Square, that Midtown Station I was just talking about, and the Chinatown International District. As some of you may know, the Ballard Link extension was separated from the West Seattle Link extension and is going through a new environmental impact statement process. They finished up their scoping period last fall, and we are expecting the release of a draft environmental impact statement sometime this year. One of the CID segment alternatives that was studied in the previous EIS, and we expect to be included in this one, is the Dearborn Station alternative, which used to be referred to as the south of CID. That area is, or that station location is within the Duwamish Manufacturing Industrial Center. And so if the Sound Transit Board were to select that alternative, which is only one of several possible outcomes at this point, then a significant amount of planning and community engagement work would need to be done to understand and then facilitate community priorities for the development around that station. So while OPCD is, preparing for that as one possibility, we are currently waiting to have more certainty from Sound Transit about its various alternatives in the CID area. So that's where we are with that work. In the meantime, the city is partnering with Sound Transit on their South Downtown Hub planning process, which includes Midtown, the current CID light rail station area, including Union Station, and that sort of Dearborn area south of the CID. And lots of interesting work is being done to engage the residents and business owners of the CID and Pioneer Square in a discussion about what they want to see done in this broader geography of South Downtown. Out of that, we're hearing some interesting priorities, including an investment in safety and for pedestrians who are moving through these spaces, enhancing the public spaces, including plazas, and opening up publicly owned buildings like Union Station to community use and maybe eventually even community control or ownership down the road. There's been two pretty in-depth workshops that Sound Transit has led with City Partnership, and a third is planned for sometime in the first quarter or early second quarter this year. So we are tracking that and certainly see that as vital to the success of South Downtown. Okay, that is the sort of sample of work that I'm doing in relation to the Downtown Activation Plan. And so I'll stop sharing the screen, and thank you for your patience with a somewhat long presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that the Commission has.
All right, thank you so much, Tiernan. It's a pleasure to kind of get the broad sweeping update of the various ways that the city's focusing and trying to activate the downtown area. Sometimes we get like one project and they come and talk to us for like 20 minutes, and then we don't feel like we're sufficiently informed nor sufficiently engaged. So really appreciate the broad scope of what you brought to us today. If folks want to put their names in the queue, I'm gonna we've got Nick and Matt. So if Nick wants to take it away.
Great. Thank you for the presentation, and agreed getting kind of the more information is always helpful. But with that, I can have more questions. So it's really in 3 of the projects maybe that you had named. So and maybe I'll just put out my questions if that's helpful, and then you can respond. So for the first topic around upper level building signage that you mentioned, just curious kind of what are the considerations that are being weighed with high-rise signage. It doesn't seem like Seattle has a huge presence of high-rise signage outside of hotel uses, and I feel like even the rationale for hotel uses is a bit dated. As I understand it, it's usually, so people can navigate in the middle of the night. Oh, there's the hotel, but we all have phones now, and so that doesn't seem as pressing of a reason to have high-rise signage. And so just curious about the considerations that are being weighed with some sensitivity that I have around kind of becoming overly commercial with our skyline and really kind of the harm that might create. So that's just one question. And then for the commercial to residential, exciting to hear the city kind of taking advantage of that sales tax deferral, and would be kind of interested in tracking that through. The commission received a briefing about this legislation, possibly more before I joined. And at the time that at least I got the briefing, there was 12 projects, I think, that were anticipated in 7 years. And I'd imagine when we got that update, that might not have accounted for the sales tax deferral. And then also those 12 projects, I assume, one, I don't know how many units that was in terms of production, but I assume those projects wouldn't include affordable housing because we understand the cost to convert is extremely high. So it's typically unviable unless units are priced at more luxury levels. So the sales tax deferral is encouraging that it might provide some affordable units with it. I'm curious if you have a better estimate now, if that changes the number of projects that you predict that would take advantage of the conversion legislation. It just seems like the pool of viable buildings is relatively small. So the impact of the legislation seems relatively small, but there's been a lot of focus in Seattle on kind of really getting the most you can out of this legislation. So kind of some comment, I guess, with a question. And then the last piece was on the Lit I-5 project. You had mentioned the tax increment financing. Is that connected to the LID too? Is that viewed as a potential funding source for Lit I-5? And if so, I'm curious if that would be considered like a top priority in deploying some of those funds, considering the other kind of pieces that a TIF could fund or address. And then also, you mentioned some of the urban design planning efforts that are happening for Lit I-5. Curious if there's any feasibility studies that are happening in tandem with that. I haven't been tracking that project as closely, so it's possible I've just missed it. So that's what I had for those kind of 3 categories. Thanks.
Thank you. Good detailed questions. Let me know if I miss any of them. I did jot them down, but feel free to let me know if I missed them or just misunderstood them. So the first was about the upper level signage, upper level building signage. And, that is sort of very early stages, but I think the general idea or rationale for why that would be, something you would pursue as part of downtown activation is that you might be able to attract employers who want to, have like a sort of signature presence in downtown Seattle, and that's one of the ways that they can sort of, make their claim and show that they're here in the city and participating. I do think that you're always going to be weighing the impacts of that on the aesthetics of a city. And so certainly that's part of the consideration and the discussion about whether to develop this policy and sort of pursue legislation with it. I'm not the person who's, even though I am the downtown activation coordinator, I'm not the staff member who's working on that. So I don't want to say too much more than that. But that it is, something that we expect there to be multiple sides on it. There's not consensus on, what the best upper level signage policy is for any given city. So I'll leave it at that for that one. For the residential conversion projects, my understanding is that there were 12 projects that had been sort of identified at various sort of stages, right? Like some of them were farther along than others or had more viable than sort of like performas that they were working on. The one that I shared with you in the presentation is the one that I'm aware of that's sort of advancing the farthest so far, but other projects are certainly out there trying to work it out. The sales tax deferral, sales and use tax deferral is something that we are excited about. And we've been trying to raise the awareness within that sort of pool of projects that, hey, this is out there. It's something that the department is pursuing. We're going to be working on, educating the Seattle City Council about the potential benefits of it. And it would be great if you can come and, talk about what it would mean for your project and your ability to provide affordable units in the development. So that's certainly something that we've been trying to raise whenever we talk about residential conversion. That said, it may be that the policy, the program needs to be adopted first for it to really energize folks. We're hopeful that everybody will see this as sort of a good use of state sort of policy, state law to enable us to have one more tool in the toolkit to make these challenging projects actually happen and maybe even produce some affordable units. Lit I-5 and tax increment financing is something that has been discussed kind of since the genesis of the idea. For us, it's one of the potential areas where you could have a tax increment financing sort of collection and reinvestment zone. It's not the only one, but there's some reasons why it's sort of interesting. Namely because tax increment financing looks at the current tax revenue, and then everything above it, that increment, is what you're getting a percentage of to reinvest. Well, with land that doesn't exist, a lid that's not there yet, you have nothing taxable. So you could potentially have a very great increment to use. That said, it's not the only area that comes to mind, and because the lids are something that is going to take time to build with WashDOT, we can also think of other places that we might want to start. Each jurisdiction is allowed to have 2 TIF districts, so it's not like we just have to pick one place.
Great, thanks so much.
Sorry, I forgot for a minute that was my job to call on the next person. I was distracted by the pictures in the chat, which we'll hear from Dylan in a minute on those. Matt, please go ahead.
I just have some quick, there are more comments. With the upper level signage, that seems like it's a bell that you can't unring once you decide to do it. So I appreciate that we're going very, very slowly with that. In fact, I would say don't, but that's for other folks to decide. I wanted to kind of compare the Lid I-5 versus the Wasca site. I was really excited about the C40 competition for the, to suss out what would happen there at the Wasca site, but the barrier to entry for that competition is too high. It's incredibly high. It's so high that the expectations there are. I mean, I think if you get 2 entries, I feel like you'll be lucky. Because of the limitations there, as opposed to what happened with the Lid I-5, which was really a grassroots effort that spun out of this just energy about what the urban potential was there, and now that's become a project, and it's a project that has a lot of grassroots support. I feel like if I don't know what you can do to I think engage the public on the Wasca site, because I think it's just going to be we've missed opportunities on these big parcels of land. I think like the Mercer Mega Block, where we could have done so much more, but instead I feel like it's a bit of a giveaway to whoever has the deepest pockets, who can afford the high barrier to entry. So I would hope that we can maybe redirect Wasca, because it's a great site. The potential is so high, but it's not something that the public is going to have any real input on, the way that it's currently structured. And then I think I'll just leave it there. So thank you there very much, though.
Thanks, Matt. And can I ask, when you say the barrier to entry is too high, can you unpack that just in like a sentence or two so I can share it with the team?
Yeah. The requirements are that you have to have, it's not just an ideas competition about what you could do there. You have to have a developer component, you have to have a financial component. The package for the initial phase was hundreds of pages. So even like professional development teams in Seattle were like, yeah, I'm not doing that, because it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of work just to get to phase 2. So for anyone who is interested, they have to have an inside track and deep pockets. So yeah. Otherwise, I would love to put together a small crew of architects to envision what was going to happen there. But I also can't provide hundreds of pages of financial detail modeling why it's a good idea. So.
Thank you for saying that, Matt. I will share that with the rest of the team. And I do want to note that the next phase, the RFQ, is open to all to participate. So still out there if you do decide to join. And we did have 13 teams submit in the RFI, so more than two. But what we really are looking for is like that kind of like unicorn combination of like the ability to develop the project, for it to be a public-private partnership, a great design team, and environmental sort of expertise. And that I recognize is a barrier to entry for lots of folks out there. So I will pass that information along. It's definitely not the intent of the project to exclude any type of applicant that might be interested. So I'll see if there's anything else we can do to open it up.
Yeah, I would think more of a European model where even the big site gets broken down to something that's more bite-sized, and it's a series of competitions as opposed to, one competition to rule them all. That would be something that would actually spur innovation and incubate a lot of, great design.
I have lots of questions, but I have a follow-up question on this topic. So the site to me looks like it's next to a freeway or a highway, a noisy use, and that it's kind of down in the no man's land of the stadium district. So not really connected to a sense of place as much as other sites within the downtown area. And that, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an expert on the sea level rise maps or the soil stability and liquefaction details, but for all those reasons, I sort of am like, why are we investing our energy and resources over here when our downtown core and so many other neighborhoods have like urgent needs and need attention as well? So it's sort of like my reaction to like looking at the aerial of the map. And I think that we get excited about design competitions. And I think going back to Nick's comment that he didn't make very pointedly about the residential office to residential conversion, we spend a tremendous amount of intellectual time on projects that maybe aren't going to yield as much impact as other more critical issues. And like for me, when I think about downtown, I think about it becoming a place that I want to go. Like I want reasons to go back to downtown. That is not about my job. Our downtown should be a place that is just as exciting for the residents to go to as the tourists. That could start with more immediate actions like retail space activation. OED was doing some pretty cool stuff last year that I like. I went back downtown looking for holiday markets and didn't hit them this year, so I don't know if they didn't happen, but providing goods and services for the residents of Seattle in the downtown area, including a school, including more grocery stores, including more daycares, all of the components that you need to want to live somewhere and put roots down somewhere and say, this is my home. We need those in the downtown area. And so I was looking at the goals and that you had it sort of at the early on in the presentation, and a lot of them seemed about economic extraction, economic stuff around business and commercial activity. And I may have just focused on the wrong bullet points, and there could have been sort of the more like residential component of it. But that's kind of those are the things that I would love to see about downtown, is what are we doing to make it livable and just like a great place to be. And then on the CID work, when we reviewed the draft EIS for the prior extension proposal, it was really hard for us to understand what communities wanted out of that, particularly the CID. They're not a monolith. Community members have different perspectives, but it was really hard to understand how to act in like consultation with or being informed by engagement that had been done in the CID. And so I was pleased to hear that they were sort of pausing that kind of work so that there could be some more time for good engagement and input. We did write a comment letter at the time that may have some relevant comments in it. And if it's not too late to look at that comment letter as you work on the EIS scoping for the new study, I would just encourage you to go back to our letter just to see if there are comments there. I know one thing that we took issue with at the time was the quantification of impacts to businesses. The CID ground floor retail space is part of the identity of that community. And they were talking about the loss of space and the number of square feet, not in terms that were relevant to like, what does this do to the cultural identity of this community? And, you know, how much is being lost and what's the actual retail impact of that to those business owners? So with that said, if you think there are good opportunities for us to get updates from you on the CI visioning group that you are convening, I would welcome that if there seems like a relevant opportunity so that we can remain sort of plugged in and connected to that. And my final comment would be that we went as a commission on a field trip to the Wing Luke Museum when they had an exhibit that maybe was called Nobody Lives Here. And it was about, you're nodding your head, you know, but it was about the story of the city and planners and the planning commission and elected officials and transit groups making decisions about the CID as if the CID did not matter. And it was telling a counter narrative of all of the community members that got involved and spoke up. And so I'm just looking back on that history as a commission, I want us to be thinking about that legacy and being a commission that's actively working to push against efforts that maybe don't include or represent community or don't hold themselves accountable to what the community is asking for. Okay, I think that concludes my comments. Is there anything you want to respond to? I'm not looking for a response, but is there anything you want to say, Tiernan?
The one thing that I'll throw out there, because you sort of said maybe this could be a future presentation, the city supports the CID Vision Advisory Group, but that group facilitates it itself. It's sort of this interesting thing where they've gotten some funding from the city to hire a consultant and to compensate their members for their participation, but it's not convened by the city. And I think that actually is that's one of the lessons that the CID has learned over time, is it's important for it to control its own destiny. And so they are convening this group on their own, and they invite in the city to sort of like draw connections, to make presentations, to bring information and to listen. And so that, just to clarify, like that's the role that I play and that Soka Don from the Department of Neighborhoods plays. That said, like we would love to talk about that work from the perspective of OPCD and DON. And if you all want to reach out to them as the Planning Commission yourself, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Yet I think we would be happy to have just you and Soka come and talk about it from the city's perspective. We have, in all transparency, we have not talked about our commission's work plan for this year. So I don't want Vanessa to think that I'm assigning us work that we haven't as a commission agreed to. We were supposed to talk about it earlier this week and get started on it. But so as time permits with our other work around the comp plan. All right, I see Dylan has his name in the chat box. And Dylan, if you could, if you're going to say something other than the signage, if you could also sort of explain your signage comment that you put or in the chat box as well, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michaela. Hey, Tiernan, it's good to cross paths again. Yeah, just two kind of high-level comments. I apologize, I joined a little bit late, but I did catch the comment on the follow-up comments on the high-rise signage, and really just a curiosity about the history of, I guess, resistance to high-rise signage in Seattle, and how the city has views kind of what the resistance was in the past, and then what the kind of I guess what they're weighing, the positives and negatives. I'm curious to kind of understand the kind of the positives and negatives of allowing for high-rise signage versus not. And the pictures that I put in were just a view of downtown Hong Kong, which is kind of to one extreme, where you have signage all over, and basic buildings have been claimed by kind of the major businesses that have kind of bought this and are advertising themselves. But if you kind of blur your eyes and don't as much see the signs, but to see all the lights, and you kind of look at downtown Seattle, much lesser degree, but we still do have significant buildings that do illuminate their tops, respond to football games, they respond to the holidays, they change their lights based off of what the season is. We have the Ferris wheel, which is a huge lit element as well. There's a lot of potential for activation of the downtown skyline by bringing in illumination, and whether that's in the form of signage itself or other illumination. I'm just there's a certain level of excitement there. At the same time, we do want to be careful about what we're kind of selling off and allowing. But I was curious, for me personally, I just talked for myself, seeing downtown Hong Kong, it was really exciting to see all that activity happening there. And I'm just curious if downtown Seattle, or if the city of Seattle, when they talk about this, are they looking to get not to the Hong Kong level, but to allow things like that, where you have a large, a big Amazon sign on top of a couple of the Amazon towers? Is that what is being considered? And just curious kind of what the initial conversations have been at the city level for why do that or why not do that. It's kind of my first comment. And then I just had I guess my other comment that I make that doesn't necessarily require as much of a response, but is just my own personal curiosity, is kind of playing off what Michaela brought up about activation, downtown activation. And there's so much going on with the downtown activation plan. I'm still getting my head around it. And it's a very ambitious plan. It needs to be. And I appreciate kind of the large projects that you're explaining today, because there has been I think I need a desire to see what are those great visions that Seattle is creating. What are we working towards, in addition to kind of cleaning up downtown, but then what? And so it's exciting to hear more about Lit I-5 and about the Wasca site, and about some of these other the King County Civic Campus. It is good to hear about that, but my curiosity also lies personally in just the Pike Pine corridor, between Pike Pine Corridor and Pioneer Square, downtown's financial district, which we all know continues to struggle in terms of activating itself. And I'm very curious as to how that specific area is starting to evolve, see improvements as a result of downtown activation plan measures. And I know that personally, just being on 3rd Avenue and taking buses there has been a pretty dramatic improvement there. Though it still feels quiet. It feels safer now, and I use safer, but I have seen improvements just personally, and I'm very curious as to kind of what the effort is with activating, the financial district. And I know that, the conversion to residential is definitely one way of doing that, though it's very limited in terms of how many buildings will be activated by that. So the question, or the curiosity with myself is beyond residential, what other sort of activations, building up as the city has done, allowing more artists to activate some of these empty storefronts, and community spaces like we've seen in Belltown, activating the old Bergman luggage empty retail space, the illumination of the street just outside of that Bergman space over on 3rd Avenue has also been a really great measure. And so I'm just curious if there's a place or an update or an article that just talks about kind of how all these little moves have seen success and what those might be in kind of activating specifically this, what we feel is this sort of dead zone between Pioneer Square and Pike Pine. Those are just kind of my high level comments.
I can respond to both quickly. I think that I'll do it in reverse order. I also have that curiosity, Dylan, and I may have said this before you joined, but the downtown activation plan includes like many different departments. We have Office of arts and culture doing activation work and sponsoring mural competitions and things like that. You've got Seattle Department of Transportation stringing those catenary lights above 3rd Avenue. You've got Office of Economic Development trying to figure out how to like activate the storefronts and meet needs of the building owners to get tenants in quicker and faster and create those eyes on the street. And then you've got the Office of Planning and Community Development doing these kind of combination of like technical tweaks to facilitate development, big picture projects that are longer term but need like community engagement to shape the outcome. One of the things that's sort of in the middle there is the work that my colleagues are doing on the downtown regional center plan. And that has more of the kind of like overarching, like how do we make this a great place to live, to shop, to do business, like all these different pieces of it that will eventually shape all these things as well. It's just like after the downtown activation plan, which is a little more immediate. So yeah, to the point about the financial district, I do think that the whole world needs to figure out what to do with these sort of office heavy commercial cores that were built at a time with a certain mindset and sort of like one use, which is people commuting to a downtown, doing office work in the day and then leaving. We have lots of those in Seattle, lots of cities around the world have them, and it's unclear what the future holds for them. To your other point about like what's the history of resistance to upper level building signage, I don't feel qualified to answer it because I don't myself know. I just know what I've sort of heard people say when this topic comes up, which is a concern that it'll look garish or that it sort of like is too corporate in its look for the sort of aesthetic of Seattle's skyline. I think you raise an excellent point about how did we land where we landed with regards to lighting, decorative lighting on buildings and tall objects in our downtown. I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but what I can do is encourage my colleagues who are working on that to sort of like include some of the back and forth and a little bit of the history as they explore what that policy might be.
Thank you.
All right. We have one more. Deanna's up next. Jamie Tiernan did talk about the CID, but not Little Saigon. And Vanessa, do we need to adopt the minutes?
Thank you for that reminder. Ideally, however, I know we're coming up on time. I want to be respectful of commissioner time because we did say we'd adjourn at 4:20. If people can stay a little longer, we do have 2 sets of minutes, and if we don't get them approved today, we'll kick them down the road to the 23rd.
Okay, if anybody has to leave, drop your name in the chat and we can figure that out while Deanna asks her question.
Thank you. Kim, thank you so much. It really is refreshing to see someone with your vision, experience, and passion leading this work. So that's very exciting to see and motivating. Something, and maybe I missed this, it's in I'm just curious, the downtown activation plan seems to not necessarily be defined by a time frame, right? It's kind of more a set of initiatives, goals, and aspirations, right, for where we would like our downtown to go. As stewards of the comprehensive plan, the One Seattle plan, understanding that greater downtown is considered a regional center, and really the DAP, it only kind of covers half of it, right? I was just, it was really funny, Michaela, it's almost like you had read my mind at the beginning of your comments that you were making to Tiernan about, to me, when I thought we were going to be hearing about the downtown activation plan, I would assume it would have like many of these kind of ambitious, really, really long-term projects, right? Like the LID project is extremely long-term. The Waska site, extremely long-term. And so to me, activation and our economic needs to activate have kind of 3 to 5 year term goals. And it seemed like most of the near-term initiatives were more legislative, which also take a little bit of time. So I was just curious, what are the ways in which the DAP either is thinking of or incorporating more of the near-term opportunities, which can be, we can say, are more either piloty, programmatic. It doesn't seem like the plan has kind of small programs included in its description, but maybe I missed that. So I just wanted to see if you could expand on that, kind of just, if I were to even, kind of like hashing out a timeline of when the projects you shared with us today, all very exciting, when would they actually materialize? We're talking that I like to be optimistic, but even within our 20-year planning horizon for the One Seattle plan, I don't see them coming to fruition. And maybe I don't want to be a pessimist, but I just also understand planning realities, funding challenges, understanding, current administration, federal funding opportunities that, a lot of these projects would require, and how that might be a little bit challenging in the current landscape. So having said that, I think it would be really encouraging to see the DAP incorporate within our political and funding reality landscape initiatives that could feel like are going to change the streets, are going to change the way we live in downtown. Start creating those opportunities that, Michaela, you stole from me, like daycare, supermarket, like how would I choose to live in downtown? I haven't seen it reflected yet, or a cohesive strategy that would make me think, yeah, maybe in 5 years I can move downtown. Right? So if that is not the horizon, how is the DAP incorporating that kind of those opportunities for programmatic efforts to be part of the DAP?
And if I could just interject for a moment, Tiernan, I want to be respectful of, I don't know if you had a hard stop at 4:20, because I know you have commitments after this. So if you don't have time to answer that, I will follow up with you separately and then get back to the full commission.
That is very conscientious of you, Vanessa. Thank you. I'm good till 4:30, so I think I can probably answer Deanna's question and still have time to get out.
Thank you so much. And we no longer have quorum to approve the minutes, so we'll take the time that you have until you have to leave. Thank you.
Excellent observation. And I do agree. The overview that I gave was sort of like, what can I pull out of this bigger umbrella that is in my work program? Just the sort of OPCD work that sort of got that near-term legislative stuff and the bigger term, longer planning projects. The DAP umbrella itself includes like a lot more projects and initiatives. There is a slide deck that I was shared, but that I don't know if it's been presented publicly yet, so I can't share it with all of you. That is an update on the second half of 2024 DAP initiatives and where they're at and sort of progress that's been made. I believe that that's going to be presented by Markham McIntyre, the director of the Office of Economic Development. And so that would be one place you could go to get like a bigger, more relevant sense of like what's going on right now with DAP across the spectrum. That's not just OED's portfolio. It's all the initiatives that fall in that underneath that umbrella. The other thing that I'll say, and this sounds like a bit of like a dodge, but it's really not. The website that they've put together contains that dashboard, but it also contains a lot more information about it, and it's a good website. They have the city website, but they also have this Downtown as You kind of campaign branded website that explains a bit more about the vision. It's kind of got a broader audience and provides the most recent sort of like progress updates as a PDF or a PowerPoint presentation. So if I fell short, I apologize, but there is more information to be had on sort of like what the timeline is for the DAP and sort of how the various initiatives that address these 7 goals might be sprinkled throughout, kind of near term, medium term, and long term.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll check it out.
Tiernan, is that the correct website that I dropped in the chat? Downtownisyou.com.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, sorry. Apologies for us thinking you sort of like we're worried about the city being a little too myopic in its approach. But it was really a helpful clarification there at the end that you're just one piece of the puzzle. Well, everybody, it was a pleasure connecting and getting to think a little bit about our downtown core for an hour or so and get a break a little bit from the comprehensive plan. Appreciate you going a few minutes late. Vanessa, is there any, so as a reminder, I just want to encourage folks, I think I may be one of the people who hasn't sent Robin my hours for volunteer stuff. And then just to remember, I think I'm one of these people too. As soon as you get the email from Robin, reply to it about whether or not you're going to attend a meeting. Any other committee business matters, Vanessa, to attend to?
Nope.
Nope. All right, everybody. With that, the January 9th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.
Thanks
Bye.
all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.